card games are inherently RNG based. Did you queue into an unfavorable matchup? Who goes first and how good is your starting hand? To address the variance of the latter, Wizards of the Coast introduced the Mulligan. But how we take mulligans now is not how it was played out in the olden days. The original Mulligan rule stated that whenever a player had drawn either 7 lands or no lands at all, they were allowed to, once per game, shuffle their hand back and draw 7 new cards. But of course, we all know that a hand can be unplayable even if you have just 1 land or maybe 6 lands. Wizards quickly realized that this version of the Mulligan wasn't it. That's why they relied on the pro players to test a new way to fix the starting hand problem. At Pro Tour Paris, players were allowed to simply shuffle back their opening hand into their library if they were unhappy with it, on the condition that they would draw 1 card fewer after the mulligan. You could do this as often as you wanted to, going down 1 card every time. And thus the Paris Mulligan was born. It was during this time period that our little goblin commander friend had its inception, in a wonderfully weird set of conspiracy where he served as a dungeon warden, planning to throw the plane of Fiora in disarray. But patience is a virtue, and he could feel the tides change in his favor. In the meantime, Wizards saw that the Paris Mulligan still put the player doing it at a significant disadvantage, and thus a new rule was tested and implemented during the Vancouver Pro Tour of 2015. It worked quite similar to the Paris Mulligan, but after a player had found their starting hand to be satisfactory, they were allowed to scry 1, which means to look at the top card of your library and either leave it be or put it underneath. Almost, said her little goblin friend, but not quite there yet. Today, and since 2019, we have the strongest version of a mulligan yet, the London Mulligan. I'm sure you all know, but whenever you mulligan nowadays, you draw a fresh, new hand of 7 cards, and then put one of those cards from your hand on the bottom of your library. The second mulligan, you draw 7 and then bottom 2, and so on and so forth. And here, little Grenzo's ears perked up. Finally, it was time to unleash the horrors that were sitting at the bottom of the deck, to free what was thought to be sealed away for the remainder of the game, or until you crack a fetch land. Grenzo the Dungeon Warden is a red, black, and X 2/2 goblin rogue. He enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, so the more mana you spend on it, the more powerful he gets. His power is important because for 2 generic mana, without tapping Grenzo, you put the bottom card of your library into your graveyard. If it is a creature card with power less than or equal to Grenzo's power, put it onto the battlefield. If only there was a way to control the bottom of your library. Turns out this introduction wasn't just useless yapping after all. That's right, Grenzo takes an integral part of the Magic rule set meant to console unlucky players and turns it into a tutor-like effect. The first thing you do in a Grenzo commander deck is you mulligan down to 6 or even 5, found a good payoff, throw it into the dungeon at the bottom of your library and unleash it at your will. The first subset of cards I want to talk about is the cards that help Grenzo alongside the London Mulligan. It's cards like Darksteel Pendant, a 2-mana artifact that is indestructible, and for 1 and tapping it, you scry 1. Maze Mind Tome is a slightly power-crept version, a 2-mana artifact that you can simply tap to put a page counter on it to scry 1. For 2 and tap, you can put a page counter on it and draw a card, and if there are 4 or more page counters on this artifact, you exile it and you gain 4 life. But scrying has also been stapled onto some lands. Temple of Malice is the black and red tapped land that scries for 1 when it enters, and Zephyrin Void is a colorless land that enters untapped. It scries 1, but of course it only taps for a colorless mana. Scrying is not the only way though to get cards to the bottom of your library. Over the course of its lifetime, Magic has seen quite a few different ways to achieve this. One of the most common is putting cards from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. We see this on cards like Tomb Trawler, a 2-mana 0/4 for 2, and without tapping it, you put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. The effect is much older than that though. In Alliances, we saw a 2-mana artifact that has the same effect. Pay 2, put the top card of your graveyard on the bottom of your library. But even that is not the only way to put cards to the bottom. Fire Prophecy and Volcanic Spite are virtually the same card. Both of these instants cost 2 mana, you deal 3 to something, and then you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, you draw a card. So instead of making use of the graveyard, you can get the best targets out of your hand on the bottom of your library. A similar feat can be achieved by playing Teferi's Puzzle Box, a 4-mana artifact that reads at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in his or her hand on the bottom of his or her library in any order, and then draws that many cards. Valakut Awakening is wonderfully flexible because it is an MDFC, so you can play it as a land in a pinch. But if you do have the mana already, you can play it as a 3-mana instant, where you put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1. So we've talked about ways to get cards out of your graveyard on the bottom and out of your hand on the bottom. But there is one card that has me unreasonably excited, that puts something from your battlefield on the bottom, and that is Tel Gilad Stylus, a 1-mana artifact from Mirrodin. It is quite simple because it just taps to put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library. Usually, once you have your creatures on the battlefield, you don't want them to go back to your library, but there is some exceptions. Maybe you want to trigger an ETB again. Maybe you need a creature to leave the battlefield to trigger it. Or maybe you use this to protect Grenzo itself. Maybe the trick that has me the most excited about giving this deck a spin is something that unveils itself when you read Grenzo's rules explanations. Because Grenzo reads, if the card is a creature card with power less than or equal, compare Grenzo's power when the ability resolves with the power of the creature card in your graveyard to determine if you put it onto the battlefield. If Grenzo isn't on the battlefield at this time, use its last known power from when it was on the battlefield. This means if someone were to kill your commander, rightfully so, it is a very powerful engine piece. In response to said removal spell, you activate Grenzo's ability and put it on the stack. Then, you activate the Tel Gilad Stylus to tuck Grenzo, sealing it away at the bottom of the library. Grenzo's ability will resolve, put Grenzo in the graveyard, and will compare itself to the power that Grenzo last had when it was on the battlefield, simply returning Grenzo to the battlefield. I like to imagine that Grenzo sees danger coming and simply throws himself into one of the jails, waits until the danger is over, and unlocks the door himself. Of course, the goal is always to put strong creatures into play using Grenzo's ability, but that is not all this little goblin can do. The careful viewer will have noticed that the card goes into your graveyard in any case. Only if it is a creature with power equal to or lower than Grenzo's, then and only then it is put onto the battlefield. If only there were cards that made use of that. Dread Return is a 4-mana sorcery. It reads, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It does have the now evergreen flashback mechanic, meaning you can cast it from your graveyard for the flashback cost. In this case, simply sacrificing 3 creatures, not paying any mana. Maximize Velocity has a different version of flashback in Jumpstart. It is a 1 red sorcery that gives target creature +1/+1 and haste until end of turn. If this card is in your graveyard, you can cast it by discarding a card in addition to paying its other cost. Then you exile it. An adjacent card also makes use of how Grenzo is templated is effects like Desecrated Tomb. 3 mana, whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. Remember that even if Grenzo unleashes a creature, it has to make a pit stop in your graveyard and only then is put onto the battlefield, meaning effects that care about stuff leaving your graveyard trigger. 2 mana to activate Grenzo isn't a lot, but it isn't nothing either. So let's talk about some cards that can help you unlock this deck. A classic way to kind of cheat on this cost is reducing the cost of activated abilities. In black and red, we have the Heartstone at our disposal, a 3-mana artifact that reads, activated abilities of creatures cost 1 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana cost to less than 1 mana, but that isn't the only way we can cheat on mana. Braid of Fire is a very special card from Cold Snap. It's a 2-mana enchantment that has cumulative upkeep, meaning at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an H counter on it and then sacrifice it unless you pay its upkeep cost for each H counter on it. Usually, this means you have to pay more and more mana to keep something around. In the case of Braid of Fire, you simply get more and more mana. Perfectly on curve is Thran Turbine, a 1-mana artifact that during your upkeep gives you 2 generic mana that cannot be spent to cast spells. So on turn 1 you could drop this, on turn 2 you could play Grenzo, and on turn 3 you could in your upkeep already activate Grenzo. Quite neat. A card that is potentially less strong, but also very fun and has a goated artwork is Workhorse, a 6-mana 0/0 that enters with 4+1/+1 counters on it. You can remove a counter from Workhorse to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Let's say you mulligan to 5, you put this at the very bottom and another payoff on top of it. First activation gets Workhorse. Workhorse means 2 more activations, so you get the other payoff and 1 extra look. But to what avail are we doing this? What is the point of jumping through so many hoops just to cheat some low power creatures into play? Well, let's talk about the payoffs, but first a preamble. I know you can upcast Grenzo to have 5 or 6 or any amount of power, and I'm sure there's good deck builders that can find a sweet spot. But whenever I look to enable a commander like this, I want to take the most straightforward path so I don't need to rely on additional variables like how high Grenzo's power is at a given point. So we're gonna talk about some weirdly powerful 2-power creatures. The first card that comes to mind when I think of a really powerful 2-power creature is Kiki-Jiki the Mirror Breaker, a 5-mana 2/2 Goblin Shaman that has haste, and it taps to put a creature token into play that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That creature token gains haste, but you need to sacrifice it at the end of your turn. Unfortunately, a lot of the Kiki combo that is power 2 or less is in blue. But red does have a 2-card infinite combo with Kiki-Jiki. The other part of the combo is Zealous Conscripts, a 5-mana 3/3 haste. When it enters, you gain control of target permanent until end of turn. You untap that permanent, it gains haste. This card of course was meant to steal cards from your opponent, but together with Kiki-Jiki, it goes infinite because you take control of Kiki-Jiki and untap it. You make a copy of the Zealous Conscripts, that copy on ETB untaps Kiki-Jiki, and you do it again and again and again and again, and have infinite hasty attackers. Treasonous Ogre is a card that definitely wasn't balanced around players having 40 life. Because for paying 3 life, you can add a red mana to your mana pool. Of course, given that your starting life total is 40, you can do this quite a bit to activate your Grenzo or simply hardcast something from your hand. We could talk about so many really good cards that just happen to have 2 or less power. Pitiless Plunderer is a staple in Commander that creates a bunch of treasure tokens whenever stuff dies. Shirei Shizo's Caretaker is a 5-drop that happens to have 2 power, and whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from play, you may return that creature card to play under your control at end of turn if Shizo is still around. Andrake Sar, Master Breeder, comes with a bunch of thralls, and so does Zanger Autocrat. Hal's Caretaker is a 4-mana 1/1 that taps to sacrifice a creature and return another creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. But the real kickers I found to be a 2-card combo that is pretty much a 1-card combo, and another really weird card from Cold Snap. Let's talk about the less exciting but way more powerful combo. It is Marilyn of the Morn Song. Marilyn is a 3-mana 2/3 elf wizard. She reads, players can't draw cards. Wow, that is pretty powerful for a 3-drop. What else does she say? Well, she says, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player loses 3 life, searches his or her library for a card, and puts it into his or her hand. Then they shuffle the library. Usually, a card like this that alters how players draw cards face the issue of you play them at sorcery speed, and the first person that benefits is an opponent. then another opponent, then another opponent, and only then do you get to benefit off of this card. Usually in the case of a card like Marilyn, this leads to someone tutoring a removal spell, and then they just bite the bullet, get rid of it, spend 2 mana, and the nightmare is over. But of course, Grenzo can get you your Marilyn at instant speed. That means at the end of your last opponent's turn, you put Marilyn into play, and you are the first person that gets to tutor for a card by paying 3 life. What is the best card to tutor for? Well, there's a couple of really good ones. They're all in this deck, but the best one is probably Opposition Agent. A 3 mana 3/2 game changer. It has flash, and you control your opponents while they are searching their libraries. Now, you might think that you can fail to find a card when you have Opposition Agent out, but since Marilyn doesn't give any instructions on how to search your deck, aka for a basic land or whatever, you cannot fail to find. You do need to find something, but Opposition Agent has a third line of text, and that reads, while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. This is pretty much a 1-card combo. Grenzo as your commander is always at your disposal. You don't even need to upcast him because Marilyn has 2 power. Oftentimes during gold fishing, I found myself mulliganing to 6, putting a Marilyn underneath. You drop Grenzo on 2. Before you start your 3rd turn, you drop Marilyn onto the board. Turn 3, you tutor Opposition Agent, and the game has effectively ended unless someone has a removal spell in their hand that they can cast. If you choose to include this combo, be wary. I think this pretty much immediately puts you in bracket 4. There is another card that you could argue immediately puts you in bracket 4, but in my opinion, it is less egregious and much more fun because much more niche. From 2006, we have a card from Cold Snap. Herald of Leshrock is another one of those cards that put a creative spin on cumulative upkeep, because at the beginning of your upkeep, you put an H counter on this permanent. You do not need to spend mana on this though. No, the actual upkeep cost on this 7 mana 2/4 is gaining control of a land that you don't control yet. This means you drop this. First upkeep, you steal a land from an opponent. Second upkeep, you steal 2 lands from an opponent. It's gonna be pretty difficult to remove this card if you don't have lands to cast it. Additionally, just as a bonus, this creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control but don't own. And of course, as a safety valve, when this creature leaves the battlefield, each player gains control of each land they own that you control. It will probably make you lose friends, but for some people that's the reason why they play certain commanders. When I saw how powerful Grenzo was with the London Mulligan, I got more hype than is reasonable considering this is a children's card game, but I simply had to share my love for this guy. I hope you enjoyed this ode to a weird goblin warden who loves his job so much that after being fired, he went to a different plane just to become a jail warden again. Anyways, always remember, be kind to yourself and others. Goodbye.